Chapter 10, 96. Windflower Snow Moon. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Fang Yuan wore a white robe. His black hair was flowing with the wind. He slowly descended into many northern plains within the sovereign immortal aperture. He was planning to undergo tribulation in this place again. The other areas had resources placed in them. Many northern plains only had this icy area, and most importantly, the snow monsters, filled with heaven's will, were all eliminated already. The sovereign immortal aperture had a huge space, but the calamities and tribulations only targeted Fang Yuan. Therefore, the tribulation would occur where he was located. The immortal aperture had already been placed. It was in northern plains. The tributary of the river of time in the immortal aperture linked to the river of time outside, and the rate of time inside greatly slowed down. First, he inspected his arrangements. There were large numbers of goo worms placed in the sovereign immortal aperture. Most of them were goo worms related to the killer movie Immortal Tribulation tempering aperture. Other than that, there was Donghun Mountain right beside Fang Yuan. Right now, Donghun Mountain looked completely different from before. Fang Yuan did this to prevent others from using fixed immortal travel to enter while he was undergoing tribulation. He got rid of this possibility before it could be used. During the first tribulation, Fang Yuan did not have Pulling Mountain immortal goo or landscape as before. He could not bring Donghun Mountain him. But now it was different. With Pulling Mountain, Fang Yuan could single-handedly drag Donghun Mountain into his immortal aperture. If he had to request for help from other hairy man, goo immortals, not only would he need to waste his sect contribution points, he would also need to let the hairy man, goo immortals, into his sovereign immortal aperture, exposing his huge secret. With landscape as before, he was not afraid that Donghun Mountain would be destroyed in the calamity. After all, the more severely Donghun Mountain was damaged, the fewer the guts goo produced. After some inspections, Fang Yuan confirmed that his arrangements had no problems. Immediately at his will, the entrance of the sovereign immortal aperture opened. Huff, huff, huff. A huge amount of heaven and earth, Chai, entered the sovereign immortal aperture through the entrance. At once there was a huge commotion, as if tidal waves were crashing in. This time I brought in Donghun Mountain, increasing the burden on the sovereign immortal aperture. Thus there is more heaven and earth chi than last time. Heaven and earth chi rushed in fiercely. Fang Yuan also activated the goo worms outside of his immortal aperture at the same time. He had already done this setup once before. Fang Yuan was quite familiar with it. While undergoing tribulation, Fang Yuan naturally used Immortal Tribulation tempering aperture. First, the killer move Immortal Tribulation tempering aperture could indirectly weaken the earthly calamity's power. Second, it could draw out reckless savage's true meaning, helping Fang Yuan with his transformation path cultivation. Unlike the first tribulation, this time many of the mortal goo used for forming Immortal Tribulation tempering aperture belonged to Fang Yuan. He even modified Immortal Tribulation tempering aperture himself, making some slight tweaks. The modified Immortal Tribulation tempering aperture was one of the preparations Fang Yuan made for this tribulation. Even though his refinement path attainment level was not high, he had Grandmaster Wisdom path attainment level. His modifications were just icing on the cake. They were not crucial aspects. But as long as he continued his research, Fang Yuan was sure that he would make this killer move as suitable for himself as possible. After all, Fang Yuan could not always rely on Langya sect. Each time he underwent tribulation, he needed to borrow so many goo worms from Langya land spirit. There was a huge cost in it. Fang Yuan modified Immortal Tribulation tempering aperture so as to break free from Langya land spirit's control in this aspect. A moment later, Fang Yuan completed his arrangements and began to use his immortal essence, activating his goo worms. Green light shone, filling the entire immortal aperture while connecting to the outside world. Gradually, a green hue appeared outside the immortal aperture, covering a huge surrounding area. Tens of thousands of green grape immortal essence beads were used, allowing Fang Yuan to activate the killer move Immortal Tribulation tempering aperture. The second earthly calamity descended. The world rumbled, winds blew as clouds shifted. At first, there was only a mild wind, but soon the intensity of the wind rose greatly. In the blink of an eye, a huge wind blew. It had the force to sweep the world and blow away all life. What tribulation is this? Fang Yuan stood on the peak of Donghun Mountain, awaiting vigilantly. Even though he had not recognized the earthly calamity yet, he could see that this earthly calamity was like last time. It was far beyond reason in terms of power. Intense winds blew, blowing the snow and ice on the ground up, causing the area to become obscured. The sovereign immortal aperture had few light path down marks to begin with. It was dim. With the raging winds and snow, Fang Yuan's vision became very limited. Ding, ding, ding. Ding, ding, ding. What sound is that? Fang Yuan had already activated his methods to investigative, but he suddenly heard the sound of chimes from within the snow and wind. This strange scene made Fang Yuan frown slightly. Don't tell me this is... A thought flashed in his mind. At this moment, the sound of chimes became louder. A huge green flower flew out of the wind, crashing into Donghun Mountain. This green flower was extremely fast. It was simply faster than lightning. After crashing into Donghun Mountain, a huge mark was left on Donghun Mountain. The mountain rocks along the way were all smashed into bits before being blown away by the wind. Ding, 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 ding. Wind chimes rang again. At the next moment, 18 green flowers flew out and crashed into Donghun Mountain. They turned into dust, but 18 blemishes were made on Donghun Mountain. These are wind flowers. Fang Yuan's eyes were shining brightly. He confirmed this in his mind. Wind flowers were a type of wind essence. They were only produced in extremely intense winds. They had no roots and floated in the wind. They were large like horse carriages. They were light green in color and were extremely sharp. Ding, ding, ding! Fang Yuan had just recognized these flowers when the next wave of wind flowers came again. The flowers were in greater numbers now. There were 40 to 50 of them. They were attacking from all directions, crashing into Donghun Mountain consecutively. Donghun Mountain's surface was impacted. Dust and smoke rose, fragments of rocks were scattered by the wind and vanished. Fang Yuan quickly retreated, moving away from the mountain peak. He gritted his teeth, feeling slightly troubled. Last time, Heaven's will created a large number of snow monsters, but I could fly and had the initiative. This time, Heaven's will learned its lesson. It changed its tactics and used the Windflower Tribulation on me. This was Fang Yuan's weakness. Fang Yuan's speed was lower than the Windflowers, and his defensive methods were only at mortal level. Thankfully, I moved Donghun Mountain here this time. Otherwise, I'd have no place to guard myself. It would be terrible. Fang Yuan felt extremely glad. Landscape as before. He used his time path immortal goo. The blemishes on Donghun Mountain vanished. It returned to normal. But soon at the next second, a barrage of windflowers attacked again, smashing layers of the mountain's surface into pieces. This cannot go on. Activating immortal tribulation, tempering aperture already used more than half of my immortal essence. Even though I am safe currently, I am expending a lot of green grape immortal essence. Restoring Donghun Mountain is merely prolonging the inevitable. Fang Yuan squinted. Thoughts were churning rapidly in his mind. He had rich battle experience. He quickly thought of a countermeasure. Strength Path Killer Move, Myriad Self. Transformation Path Killer Move, Familiar Face. Immortal Gudark Limit. His body shook. He utilized his methods, as countless Fang Yuan occupied the whole of Donghun Mountain. One of them roared at the sky as all of the Fang Yuan phantoms rushed towards the winds outside of the mountain. At the same time, Fang Yuan's actual body used Familiar Face and Myriad Self to conceal himself. He turned into a rock on Donghun Mountain. With Change Form, Immortal Goo, Familiar Face was closer to the original version. It was easy to use, having instantaneous transformations. It was unlike before when Fang Yuan used a large number of Mortal Goo to replace the effect of Change Form, Immortal Goo, causing Familiar Face to need a very long time to activate. After turning into a common rock, Fang Yuan did not rest. He used Dark Limit Immortal Goo, concealing his aura. Ding, ding, ding. A large number of windflowers attacked the tens of thousands of Fang Yunyun phantoms. The calamity's firepower became less concentrated. Donghun Mountain sustained less pressure than before. In a moment, Fang Yuan's myriad self-phantoms were all exterminated by the windflowers. Fang Yuan used myriad self again, summoning countless phantoms that charged out carrying his aura. The windflowers scattered and danced in the wind. Many phantoms were instantly destroyed. After some repetitions, Heaven's Will sensed Fang Yuan's tactic. As the windflowers stopped paying attention to the Fang Yuan phantoms, they targeted their attacks at Donghun Mountain. Fang Yuan gritted his teeth, feeling the ill intent of Heaven's Will. Donghun Mountain is my greatest sources of revenue. Heaven's Will wants to destroy it and ruin my future prospects. Thankfully, Fang Yuan had landscape as before. He had landscape as before to restore Donghun Mountain, but it could only let Fang Yuan maintain the situation. He would still be in a passive state. Green Grape Immortal Essence was rapidly expended. Triple-layered Sword Wave, Strength Path, Giant Hand. Fang Yuan tried to counterattack, but the windflowers were too fast. The two killer moves were ineffective, especially Strength Path Giant Hand. Even though it was powerful, it was too slow. It could not catch any windflowers at all, unless the windflowers came at it. Poison Breath. Fang Yuan breathed out dark purple poisonous gas that scattered with the wind. Large numbers of windflowers wilted upon coming into contact with the poison. Fang Yuan showed great joy on his face. Poison Breath was modified from the Wisdom Path killer move, harboring malicious heart. It used woman's heart as the core. It had many flaws and was of comparatively low value. Fang Yuan rarely used it. To think that it was so effective now. Under the effect of Poison Breath, the windflower's offensive power lowered immensely. The winds were starting to slow down. A cold light shone on the entirety of Donghun Mountain. Fang Yuan raised his head and saw that in the sky there was a crescent moon that appeared out of nowhere. Fang Yuan squinted. He muttered under his breath, "Snow moon." This crescent moon was pure white as snow. It shone down with a pale light, causing Donghun Mountain's temperature to fall. Soon layers of frost began to cover the surface of Donghun Mountain. Fang Yuan felt like there was a weight on his heart, he thought. So this is not a windflower tribulation, but a windflower snow moon tribulation. The former is an earthly calamity, but the latter is a heavenly tribulation. This second earthly calamity is simply too absurdly strong.